more like second parents. And when I wore my first shorts, which actually were pedal pushers, if you know what they are, they call them capri pants today. And he saw me in those pedal pushers, and he said to me, parents, girls, and when I wore my first shorts, which actually were pedal pushers, if you know what they are, they call them capri pants today. But when he said that, I listened to him. I didn't necessarily quit wearing capri shorts, but I did listen to him because I respected him and his wife, who I did sunshine bands with many Sabbath. Becoming baptized around 12 with other friends was a natural progression of my Christian experience. Like most children, I always wanted to fit in, but was teased throughout my elementary school by one of the boys every single day. And I kid you not, it was every single day. And yet, as an adult, he did not remember. Fortunately, I had a great friend who was very good to me through that whole experience. Still, I took comfort in the church service and loving the music. I was part of the choir, and I had my first piano recital in the church. During the sermon, the one pastor would tell us kids to write down the text of his sermons for that day, or to tell him after church how many times he said a certain word. What was so great about that is that actually had me listening to what the preacher said. I was writing down, and when you write down and listen and write down, you remember things a whole lot more. I actually have so many memories from that time, and people question this, but I do remember actually falling off the couch when I was 6 months of age. And so there's a lot of very vivid memories of this time, but that in particular, because we used to sit right about the third bench. My parents would always choose that bench, and the pastor would be here and I would be sitting there. And I especially like counting the number of times, because supposedly he had already counted how many times he was going to say that word in his sermon, but it engaged me. It got me involved in even a sermon. Being good was extremely important to me, however. And today I know that that desire did have a negative effect on my relationship with God, because I became more about being good than having that relationship. Through my teenage years and until I got married at 37, music was extremely important and was a huge part of every Sabbath, and even involved some Sunday jobs. A thing that you may not realize about someone who's a musician who's always up front is a negative part of that was I didn't know people's names, because I would come to church and I'd immediately be at the piano, or I'd immediately be at the organ, or I was directing the choir. One of the things that, so yes, I was musically involved, and it was a wonderful experience in a lot of ways, but not everything brings us to the relationship with God that we really need. When I finally found my true love, who was also a Seventh-day Adventist, I was totally committed to our relationship. Dennis was a very good Christian lead of our household, but for many reasons was not very social, even though people immediately liked him when they met him. He had also some physical difficulties, which made it difficult for him to sit up in church. Our life was a life of us as a couple, learning together and growing through life with adventures and trials. Losing Dennis last year was the biggest trial I have ever endured, but it did bring me to Western North Carolina and to my new church family. Our last year together had become very precious, spent with hours of watching programs like 3ABM, Amazing Facts, It Is Written, etc. It was easier for Dennis to watch than to read, and that just added to his Christian experience in the last year of his life. When I did join this particular church, the Banner Elk Church, it was not for the reasons I have stayed. Originally, I joined because, well, first of all, it does have an organ and a piano, which I do love. and I do love making music on both of them. But I knew that I could share music here where my brother was sharing music at Mountain City. And since I live kind of halfway between the two, it just seemed like the right place for me to be, and it has been. I have felt blessed to know each and every one of you, to have messages preached that are biblically sound, messages that stretch my thinking. And haven't we been blessed by the Sabbath school lessons over the last year? However, being single again has been a blessing and a curse. For me, spiritually, too much time to think. And boy, the devil likes it when we have time to think. And the devil knows this with each of us, but more time than I have ever had to develop my relationship with God. But relationship with God raised a lot of questions for me. How do we go about doing this? I saw the tremendous growth of our pastor Brandon this year. And I do believe that I have seen a tremendous growth in his sermons over the last year, and him as a person, his family, and it has really been a blessing for me. And I heard the young students from the seminary in Virginia, and I felt very incapable and really at a loss of where to start. Because I'd always been a performer in church. I had a lot of knowledge, and to be perfectly honest, I've never questioned my Adventist faith. I've never questioned the foundational beliefs of the Adventist church. Yes, I strayed away at one or two times in my life, but I never questioned those beliefs and have always understood and known that the Adventist church was the remnant church. But that relationship with God had not really happened. And I can truly say that that was very evident to me over the last year. Mark, actually, in looking at the Elk Church, Mark leads a wonderful Bible study during potluck and has such wonderful quizzes to share. Ken, I believe, stretches our minds with his knowledge, but then as I prayed more, studied more, and what I think is probably the most important key, being purposeful in what I do every day. Trust me, the devil works hard to keep me from being purposeful. Does he keep you from being purposeful? Do you have a purpose and a plan for your day, and the devil just grabs a hold of that plan and gives you all kinds of reasons why you are not going to do it? But God keeps bringing me back to what he knows I need to do. And that's in so many ways, the still small voice, how he communicates to us through prayer, how he brings things to us in any given day or moment. So why do we need a purposeful relationship with God, and what does it mean? Our daily walk with God points out right now, at this very minute, where we are in our sanctification process. And what is the definition of sanctification? Sanctification is the work of what? It's the work of a lifetime. Are we in this moment as right with God as we can be? Probably not. And I don't think we could ever answer that in the affirmative. I think we can say, are we in this moment as right with God as we can be right now? Yes. But God has so many ways to provide for us and so much growth. How are we doing with those things, whatever they are? You know what those things are in your life that we do not want to do and are allowing God to give us the power to overcome. Relationship. What does our relationship look like today versus tomorrow? Is your relationship with God different today than it was yesterday? Different today than it will be tomorrow? That's growth. And if we were to die next week, where would we ultimately go? Because I think one of the things that struck me is we know we are living in the last days. We can see that by what we see in the world today. But none of us know when our time will come. And we really have to have that daily relationship with God in order to be ready at any given moment in time. Our relationship with God is the foundation of a Christian life. It must not be stagnant. Or in the example of the axe, it must not become dull. If we use the axe and use it and don't stop to listen, don't stop to study, don't stop to, that's how we sharpen our axes, by what we develop, learn from God, from the scriptures, etc. We must grow. Do we recognize and thank God for how he has led us? Do we slow down long enough to actually be able to see how he has worked and in and through us? This relationship with God is the foundational experience that will make us capable of withstanding the last days. Do we look so much at what is going on in the world, and even looking at what is going on in our church, that truly identifies last day events, that we neglect our walk with God? And I realized that I had become very engulfed in what was going on in the world, especially what's going on in the United States. You can say from politics to the abortion, what people think is okay to do today, what people think is okay to do to others, the evil, the everything in the world today. I can't imagine that it's going to get worse when it says, as it was in the day of Noah, but apparently it is. But do we allow that to distract us from the relationship we need to have with God? Our relationship with God is being able to talk with him as to a friend. I want to talk a little bit about friendship. To have a good friendship, what do you have to do? You have to develop that friendship and grow that friendship. It has give and take to it. You talk with your best friend often. But guess what? Who really needs to be our best friend? Jesus and God needs to be our best friend. But do we think of him as our absolute best friend ever? More than our spouse, more than our children? Because we cannot be what we need to be for our spouse and our children if God is not our best friend. That's the only way that we can ultimately be the best that we can for every human being in the world. And Jesus is always available 24/7, 365. We don't even have to talk with him out loud. He reads our thoughts. We can talk to him about anything. He can even talk with us silently. And in 1 Thessalonians 5:17, what does it say in that verse? It says, pray without ceasing. If Christ has told us in the Bible to pray without ceasing, how do we do that? And are we doing that? Building my personal, and it is personal, our relationship with God is very, very personal, has become my greatest joy, my greatest desire, and my greatest need this past year. This relationship is how we know when God is talking to us. This relationship is how we sharpen that ox. With God on our side, knowing he is there, no matter what, when, where, or how situation arises, we have peace in any situation. Anything that interferes with, gives us doubt, will dull our axe. And as Ellen White wrote in Desire of Ages, worry is blind and doesn't discern the future, but Jesus has 1,000 ways to provide for us of which we know not. Just think about that. And that's 1,000 ways to provide for us, no matter how minuscule our issue is or our problem is, to a great problem. He has 1,000 ways to provide for us of which we know not. We need to be still and know that I am God. Take time every day to sharpen your axe. A sharp axe cuts more wood in less time and will make us win the battle between good and evil. God has so much he wants to tell us, give us, and guide us through. Just think of how many times you've heard a sermon on or read the story of in the Bible, or had a Sabbath school lesson study, which we just recently did, on the life of Joseph, for example. Did you not learn something new each time you studied, even if it was your 20th time? Think about that. No matter what you read in the Bible, reread in the Bible, restudy in the Bible, you will always find something new and different. And it's not the biggest book that was ever made, but what is in there is so crucial to each and every one of us. God is amazing in what he has put in one book. The Bible, a lifetime of studying, and you still learn lessons and truths about God and the plan of salvation that can lead anyone to the kingdom of God. We all can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. So my prayer for each of us is that we take the time to study with prayer. Always ask God first and be still and know that he is God. Allow yourself to learn how to hear what God is telling you. God must be the most important person in your life. Ask him to help you have that relationship. And we will close with hymn number 214. We have this hope, which is one of my favorite. The first time I heard it was in Atlanta, Georgia at the General Conference session. And that was when it was introduced as, that's the story I remember, by Wayne Hooper. And I think it's just a tremendous hymn of praise